Let's talk about ways of how we can store the vital life force, the Jing essence of which we cultivate in our internal alchemy practices. So just like any machinery or like your laptop, whenever there is energy that's put in, whenever it's being charged, the energy has to be held somewhere. There has to be a battery. So now in our energy practice, there's two ways to store energy. One, which is more or less widely known, and one that is more of an inner school knowing and of a secret, almost a hack that can 10x your results. So let's talk about the common understanding. In pretty much any Taoist or Chinese medicine school, there's this idea of the lower Dantian. Okay, this is the area 2 fingers below the belly button that can store the vital life force, store your Jing essence. I find that this way is great, and it's much more accessible for beginners. However, when you reach a certain level of energy accumulation and a certain level of building up your will, you want to find a more efficient battery pack. This information was transmitted to me by someone that's received this inner school knowledge, so it's not widely discussed, but rather the larger battery pack of which what we speak of is the bone marrows themselves. So you'll find just even experientially, not even theory, but just experientially, if you pull energy into your bone marrow, you can accumulate a lot more of that than you can ever within the Dantian. Now, both has their own appeal and has their own reason for why they do it, and also has pros and cons. I would say that the pro of accumulating energy in the lower Dantian is the type of vitality that's stored there is very much connected to the sacrum chakra, and it takes on this essence of more of a sexual creative energy. This is the energy that increases your libido. For example, for male, you have this energy, it increases libido, sex drive, testosterones, and this is very much appreciated, especially as you are aging and getting older. It gives you more of this charismatic vibe into your nature, and also for females, it is great to do this type of exercise right after menstruation in order to build up the energy that you've lost during the past cycle. The adverse side effect is that if one cultivates too much of this, and you see this in many martial art practitioners, that all they know is the lower Dantian and how to pull energy in, is that they end up having this pot belly effect. So, you know, a lot of Qigong or Tai Chi practitioners with a big belly, and oftentimes when you poke that belly, it bounces right off. It's very elastic, and it's almost like there's this bloating, but it's a bloating of energy. So it leads to lower back pain, it leads to indigestion and a lot of these issues. So if you're experiencing this, what I recommend is to go into the second, more inner school method and releasing the energy from the lower Dantian, because it's being overstimulated, it's accumulating too much of that energy. How do you cope with this, right? So if you're having the big belly, number one is you can bring that energy up into more ascension qualities, going to astral, mental, akashic realms, and pulling all the energy that you accumulate into the purpose of you elevating your own frequency. The alternative is the second method, and it's accumulating the vital essence into the bone marrows themselves. Number one, I find that the obvious benefit is that I can accumulate a lot more in my bone marrow than I can ever in the lower Dantian. And especially you find this very much correlates to the physicality of an individual. So my bone marrows are actually not too big. But for someone that has a very big frame, they can accumulate and amass a lot of energy. Now with this energy, it stores better. It can store for multiple days as opposed to something in the lower Dantian that almost you can feel the release of it much faster. With the accumulation in the bone marrow itself is an access point that you can pull the vital life force in order to use it in higher cultivation work, and especially when you access Akashic level energy. So oftentimes, because it's very draining to access the Akashic realm, so before I do that, you would want to pull in a lot of that energy into the bone marrow so that it sustains the vital life force that's required for you to enter some of these highest level of cultivation. The drawback of accumulating too much in the bone marrow is that there's so much energy that you can accumulate that your nervous system and the human body isn't built to conduct that much electric magnetic current in the body. So because of this, you might experience some Kundalini syndrome effects. So things like tingling and itchiness of the hands, of the feet. You might experience overheating, your inability to sleep at night, just overstimulation in general, and a lot of fidgetiness and a lot of just static in the air. If you're ever accumulating a lot of this into the bone marrow and you're having these side effects, I strongly encourage you to then release that back out. go into more earth style practices, releasing into the ground, going bare feet into the earth, sinking and just floating in water, just to release that excess static. Because if you do this once or twice, a couple of times in the beginning, and you just don't know any better, it's not a big deal. But if it accumulates from a lifetime worth of practice, you're going to really burn up your nervous system. And by the time you're reaching your elderly age, your body isn't going to be able to hold itself together nearly as well as someone who hasn't done these practices. So definitely go at it with a huge caution with this, and only accumulate as much energy as your nervous system can take. This might not make too much sense if you don't have the experience of cultivating it, but the moment you go in and you mess up a couple times, you're gonna be like, okay, now I know, right? This is too much and I need to release, right? And you'll become much more smarter at it in a couple of months of practicing, okay? So, if you've done a couple of times where you're burning out and you're getting those kundalini effects and heightened sensitivity to energy, not a big deal. Don't be too afraid. Just self-correct after this course. And drop a comment below if you have any additional questions or thoughts related to this concept of storing the vital life force. That's it for now.